Homeless man helps Elon Musk, gets beaten by thugs, then everything changes. The city's streets were a constant hum of noise. Honking cars, distant sirens, the murmur of pedestrians passing by, each in their own rush to get somewhere. On the edge of this busy world stood a man, barely noticeable, like a fixture blending into the backdrop of the city's concrete jungle. His clothes were worn, patched up in places where the fabric had long since frayed. His face was unshaven, and his hair, once dark, now had streaks of gray. His name, though rarely spoken by anyone who passed him, was Jack. For years, Jack had lived on the streets, learning to survive in ways most people would never imagine. He knew the patterns of the city, when to stay clear of certain alleyways, when to move to another corner to beg for spare change. He knew the faces that walked by him, the ones that never made eye contact, the ones that threw him a few coins without a second thought, and the rare ones who stopped to ask how he was doing, genuinely concerned. But most of the time, Jack was invisible to the world. On this particular morning, as the cold wind whipped through the narrow streets, Jack sat against the side of a building, a cardboard sign resting on his lap. It read simply, "Anything helps." His eyes, though tired and worn, had a certain sharpness to them, a quiet wisdom that only the forgotten and the beaten down could possess. Jack wasn't looking for sympathy. He wasn't even sure what he was looking for anymore. He had once dreamed of a different life, a better life. But now, the world he had created for himself on these streets was the only one he knew. A faint sound of approaching footsteps pulled Jack from his thoughts. He glanced up, and there, walking briskly down the sidewalk, was none other than Elon Musk, the billionaire entrepreneur, the founder of Tesla, SpaceX, and countless other ventures. Jack knew who he was, of course. Everyone did. Musk was a name that echoed through newsrooms, through boardrooms, and through the minds of the world's elite. He was a symbol of success, the kind of man who could change the world with the swipe of a hand, with the flick of a finger. But to Jack, Elon Musk was just another face in the crowd. Or at least, he would have been, if it weren't for the fact that today, Musk didn't seem like the same man he had always seen in the news. There was something different about him. He was stumbling, his head swiveling back and forth as if he was being chased. Jack narrowed his eyes, instinctively watching. The sound of footsteps quickened as Musk walked faster, glancing nervously over his shoulder. Jack's instincts kicked in, and in a moment of clarity, he knew something was wrong. His hand gripped the cardboard sign tighter, and he instinctively pushed himself to his feet, his body protesting the movement after days of sitting still. But he couldn't ignore it. Something was happening, and just as quickly as he stood up, Musk collided with a group of thugs, 3 men, all of them large and imposing, dressed in dark jackets and hoodies. They stepped into Musk's path, blocking him from moving forward. Jack's heart rate spiked. He knew these men. They were trouble, the kind who thrived on intimidation, taking what they wanted without any consequences. Musk tried to push past them, his voice desperate. "I don't have any money. Please, just let me go." One of the thugs laughed, cutting him off. "Oh, you've got something? All right," he sneered, stepping forward and grabbing Musk by the collar. "Something we want." Jack watched for a moment, unsure of what to do. Musk's face was flushed with panic, his eyes darting around as if he could find a way out. Jack felt a rush of adrenaline. He had been in situations like this before, cornered, outnumbered, with no one coming to help. But this time, something in him stirred. Maybe it was the look of genuine fear on Musk's face. Maybe it was the fact that, despite everything he'd been through, Jack still had a sense of right and wrong. Without thinking, Jack moved toward the group of men. His steps were quick, but not loud. He had the element of surprise. He reached out and grabbed the arm of one of the thugs, pulling it back with surprising force. The thug, caught off guard, turned to face Jack, his eyes narrowing in surprise. "What do you want, old man?" the thug growled. "I want you to leave him alone," Jack said, his voice low but firm. "Now," the thug sneered, raising his fist to strike Jack. But before he could land the punch, Jack twisted his wrist with a sudden jerk, causing the thug to stumble backward. For a brief moment, the thugs hesitated, clearly thrown off by the unexpected resistance. But the moment of surprise quickly faded. The thug Jack had grabbed pulled out a knife, holding it in front of him like a warning. "You're gonna regret that," the thug said through gritted teeth. Jack's heart raced, but he didn't back down. His hand found the edge of a discarded bottle lying nearby, and with a quick motion, he swung it at the thug's hand, knocking the knife to the ground with a loud clatter. The thug stumbled back, and for a second, the situation seemed to tip in Jack's favor. But then the other two thugs lunged at him. The first punch landed square on Jack's jaw, sending him crashing to the pavement. Pain exploded in his face, but he gritted his teeth, refusing to give in. He had been through worse. Meanwhile, Musk, still stunned by the sudden attack, scrambled to his feet, looking around helplessly. "Hey, get off him!" he shouted, but his voice was weak, more out of instinct than strength. But Jack was already on the ground, the weight of two thugs pressing down on him. One punched him in the ribs, and the other grabbed him by the collar, lifting him off the ground. Jack gasped for air as the world around him blurred with pain. The thugs were relentless, landing blow after blow. Through it all, Jack could feel the sense of urgency, the desperate need to survive. He couldn't let them win. Not like this. He couldn't let them hurt Musk. Couldn't let them do this to him or anyone else. As he struggled to break free, he heard Musk's voice again, this time more urgent. "Stop! Please stop!" The words hit Jack like a slap in the face. Stop? Musk wanted him to stop? No, Jack couldn't stop. Not now. Not when he had come this far. Musk might be able to buy his way out of trouble, but Jack had to fight for survival. And then, in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected happened. One of the thugs pulled back, looking up, distracted for a moment. Musk, still shaking, ran past Jack and quickly grabbed the thug's arm, twisting it behind his back. The thug yelped in pain, clearly stunned by Musk's sudden defiance. But before Musk could act further, one of the other thugs grabbed a nearby trash can lid and swung it at Jack's head. The impact was dizzying. Jack's world spun, his vision fading as the sound of Musk shouting his name grew more distant. The thugs moved in for the final blow. But then, the sirens. They were close now, too close, and for the first time in what felt like forever, Jack felt his body relax. The thugs cursed under their breath, glancing at each other nervously. They had no choice but to flee. The last thing Jack saw before the darkness took him was Elon Musk's face, a mix of disbelief and something else. Guilt, perhaps, concern, and then everything went black. When Jack regained consciousness, the first thing he felt was the sharp pain in his ribs. It burned through him, a constant, relentless throb that made him want to curl up and forget the world. But the second thing he noticed was the overwhelming silence, the kind of silence that settled in the air when something significant had just happened. His eyes opened slowly, adjusting to the dim light. He wasn't on the street anymore. He was in a clean, white room, lying on a soft bed with blankets tucked around him. The sterile scent of antiseptic hung in the air, and the faint hum of machines buzzed in the background. Jack's mind was foggy, and his vision blurred, but he could still hear voices, muffled by the walls around him. He tried to push himself up, but the pain shot through him again, causing him to gasp. His muscles screamed in protest, and he collapsed back onto the pillow. "Hey, take it easy," a voice said gently. Jack's head turned toward the voice, and there, sitting in a chair beside the bed, was Elon Musk. The billionaire entrepreneur, the man who had once been untouchable, was now sitting at his side, watching him with a mixture of concern and disbelief. His hair was messy, his clothes wrinkled, and there was an exhausted look in his eyes. "You're awake," Musk said, his voice quiet but full of an emotion Jack hadn't expected. "You really saved me back there. But you're in bad shape. I've called a doctor to take a look at you." Jack blinked, trying to process the situation. He could barely remember what had happened after the thugs attacked. The last thing he recalled was Elon's voice shouting, then the sirens, and after that, nothing. Where am I?" Jack rasped, his throat dry. "You're in a safe place," Musk said, his expression softening. "A friend of mine's place. I had the thugs chased off before they could do any more damage. You're lucky, though. If they'd gotten their way, it would have been a lot worse. Jack turned his head, the memory of the fight flooding back. His first instinct had been to protect Elon Musk. And now, here he was lying in a comfortable bed while Musk, someone who had everything, sat there, looking at him like he was some sort of hero. "Why are you helping me?" Jack asked, the question slipping out before he could stop it. You're Elon Musk. You could have left. You could have just let it happen." Musk's gaze dropped for a moment, as if contemplating the question. "I guess I could have," he said quietly, "but I didn't. You didn't hesitate when those guys came at me. You didn't think about it. You just acted. And for that, I owe you." Jack shook his head, the weight of the situation starting to sink in. "You don't owe me anything. I'm just some guy on the streets. You're—" Musk interrupted him, leaning forward slightly. "No, Jack, you're not just some guy. You showed me something today, something I've forgotten in all my success and my wealth. You showed me what it means to care, to act without thinking about yourself, to help others even when it costs you. That's rare. Most people don't have that, and I've seen it all." Jack shifted uncomfortably, trying to sit up, but his body felt heavy. "I didn't do it for you. I did it because no one deserves that kind of treatment. Those thugs, they don't care about anyone. They don't care who you are." Elon's eyes flickered with something Jack couldn't quite place. "Maybe not, but you did, and that makes you different." A silence fell between them, the kind of silence where everything that needed to be said hung in the air like an unspoken truth. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Musk seemed lost in thought, and Jack couldn't stop thinking about the strange turn his life had taken. One moment he was a nobody, an invisible man on the streets barely scraping by, and the next he was helping a billionaire survive a violent attack, then lying in some stranger's bed with that same billionaire at his side, offering him help, offering him something more. "So, what happens now?" Jack asked, breaking the silence. The question hung in the air, uncertain, filled with an anxiety Jack couldn't shake. Was this just some strange, temporary thing? Or was it the start of something he couldn't even begin to understand? Musk leaned back in his chair, looking pensive. "That's what I've been thinking about," he admitted. "I've got a lot of resources at my disposal, and I've seen too much of what's wrong in this world. Too many people are just left behind, forgotten. People like you, Jack, who slipped through the cracks. But today you made a difference. You showed that it's not about what you have or don't have. It's about what you choose to do." Jack didn't know how to respond to that. He'd never been praised for helping anyone. Most of the time, people either ignored him or threw coins at his feet, barely noticing he was even there. But now, sitting in front of Musk, someone who had everything, he was seeing things in a different light. Musk continued, his voice quieter now, almost to himself. "I've spent my whole life building companies, launching rockets, sending people to Mars. But when it comes to helping the people who need it most, I failed. I haven't done enough, and I think maybe you can help me change that." Jack blinked, his mind racing. "Me? How?" Musk looked at him, his gaze intense. "I want to do something that changes everything. I want to build something, create something that helps people who've been left behind. You've got the heart for it, Jack. You've got the courage, and I think I could use that. I think together we can make something happen." Jack didn't know if he was still dreaming or if this was reality. It all felt surreal, like some strange twist of fate. The man who had helped create Tesla, SpaceX, and all the advancements the world had come to admire was offering him a chance to change his life, to make a difference. "I don't know what to say," Jack muttered, overwhelmed. "This doesn't seem real." Musk smiled faintly, the exhaustion on his face softening just a bit. "It's real, Jack, and it's happening, whether you're ready for it or not." Jack lay back, staring up at the ceiling as the weight of the offer settled on him. He had always dreamed of escaping the streets, of finding something that would pull him out of the darkness. But he had never expected something like this. Never imagined a billionaire, someone who had everything, would look at him and see potential. For the first time in a long time, Jack felt like there was a future waiting for him. The days blurred together as Jack tried to make sense of everything that had happened. His body still ached from the fight with the thugs, but the pain was secondary now. The real struggle was trying to understand what Musk had offered him, what Musk expected from him, and how it all tied together. Every time Jack thought about it, the weight of the situation seemed to shift. First, it felt like a dream, a wild, impossible fantasy. Then, it seemed too good to be true. And as the days went on, it became clear that this wasn't just some fleeting act of kindness. Musk meant what he said. He had been living on the streets for years, decades really, and now, in a matter of days, he found himself in a situation he couldn't have imagined. He had been given a chance, a real chance, but with that chance came a tidal wave of uncertainty. Was he ready? Was he even capable of taking the opportunity that Musk was offering? And what would it mean for him, for his future? Jack spent the next few days in a state of restless indecision. He didn't know how to navigate this new life that was being offered to him. What did Musk expect from him? Was he really ready to leave behind the world he had known for so long, a world where he had nothing but his pride, his dignity, and his ability to survive? But no matter how hard Jack tried to convince himself otherwise, he couldn't deny the pull of the opportunity. Musk had seen something in him, something that had long since been buried beneath the grime of his life on the streets. And the more Jack thought about it, the more he realized that this was a chance to change everything. To change his life, to change the way he saw the world. But it also meant letting go of everything he had known, everything he had built for himself in the darkness of the streets. By the third day, Jack knew he had to make a decision. He couldn't keep hiding from the opportunity that had been presented to him. He had to either walk away, back into the uncertainty and the harshness of the streets, or step forward and embrace the chance that had been offered. It wasn't easy. The weight of his past still held him down, the memory of years spent struggling for survival haunting him at every turn. The shame he had carried with him, the feeling of being invisible to the world, the sense that he was nothing more than a ghost. These were the things he had carried for so long. The idea of giving them up felt like it would strip him of his identity. What if, by accepting this opportunity, he was also accepting that he wasn't who he had always been? The decision was harder than he'd ever imagined. But when Musk showed up at the small apartment Jack had been staying in, his determination was evident. "I've been giving you time, Jack," Musk said, his voice steady but filled with a certain urgency. "But time's running out. I need to know if you're with me, if you're ready." Jack looked at him, his thoughts whirling. "I don't know if I am," he admitted, the honesty in his voice cutting through the tension. "This is all too much. I've spent my whole life just trying to survive. I'm not sure I can just leave all that behind." Musk took a deep breath, clearly trying to choose his words carefully. "You don't have to leave it behind. I'm not asking you to forget where you came from. I'm asking you to use it. Use everything you've learned, all the strength you've built, and help me change something bigger. There's a lot at stake, Jack. A lot more than you realize. The world, it needs people who care. People like you. And I believe you can make a real difference." Jack's eyes narrowed, the doubt still clouding his mind. Make a difference? By doing what? What could a guy like me possibly do to make any kind of difference? "You've already made a difference, Jack. You saved my life. And now you have the chance to do it for others. But it's not just about me. It's about a system, a world that's stacked against people like you. And we're going to take it down piece by piece. I need someone who understands how it works. Someone who's lived it." Jack let out a slow breath, running his fingers through his hair. The weight of the words was too much to absorb all at once. But there was a part of him that knew this was bigger than he could have imagined. "I've spent my life just getting by. But what you're talking about, it's something else. Something I don't know if I'm ready for." Musk leaned forward, his expression hardening with resolve. "No one's ready for this. But it's happening, Jack. Whether we're ready or not. People like me, people with money and power, they've been controlling the narrative for too long. And it's time someone fought back. We can change that. But I need you. I need you to help me see it through." For a moment, Jack didn't say anything. He stared at the floor, his mind still racing. Everything he had known, everything he had built on the streets was suddenly irrelevant. This was about something bigger, something that could change the world. And here was Musk, offering him a place in that world. A chance to step out of the shadows and into something that could give him purpose. "I don't know," Jack murmured. "I don't know if I can do it." "You already have," Musk said, his voice firm but kind. "This is your moment. The moment where everything changes. You just have to decide if you're ready to step into it." Jack stood up slowly, his legs still unsteady from the injuries he had sustained. He moved to the window, looking out at the city below. The life he had known felt so far away now, like a distant memory. The streets, the constant struggle, the isolation, it was all so familiar. And yet, in the light of this new opportunity, it felt like a different life altogether. Jack's gaze drifted over the city. He had always felt invisible, as though he was just a ghost, watching as life went on without him. But now, with Musk's words hanging in the air, he realized something. He didn't have to be a ghost anymore. He didn't have to fade into the background. Turning back toward Musk, Jack took a deep breath. "All right, I'll do it. I'll help you. But you have to know this isn't going to be easy. It's going to be a fight." Musk stood up, a small smile crossing his face. "I'm ready for that fight. Are you?" Jack nodded, his heart still racing but something else settling inside him. Maybe, just maybe, he was finally ready for a life that wasn't defined by survival. Maybe he was ready to change the world. And maybe, just maybe, the world was finally ready to see him. Jack's decision had been made, but it didn't feel like a victory. In fact, it felt more like a leap into the unknown, a dive into a world he barely understood. He stood at the edge of it, teetering between his past and a future that seemed impossible, a future that had once only existed in his wildest dreams. Musk seemed to sense Jack's hesitation, but instead of rushing him or pushing him too hard, he gave Jack the space he needed. Over the next few days, they met, talked, and began to form a tentative plan. Musk wasn't asking Jack to change overnight, at least not in a way that would completely erase his past. Instead, Musk wanted to bring him into a new world, a world where Jack's experiences and knowledge could be used to make real change. It wasn't as simple as Musk had made it sound. Jack wasn't just going to stroll into Musk's world, flashing his street-honed street smarts and suddenly become a hero. He'd been living a different life for too long, and while the world Musk inhabited seemed like a dream to someone like Jack, it also felt overwhelming. Too many decisions, too many things at stake. The pressure was starting to weigh him down. On the third day after making his decision, Musk invited Jack to a meeting, a gathering of some of his closest advisors and business partners. "You're going to be a part of this, Jack," Musk had said with a smile, but Jack wasn't so sure. The office Musk took him to was sleek, futuristic, with polished glass and chrome fixtures reflecting the city's towering skyline. As Jack stepped inside, he was immediately overwhelmed by the high-tech displays, the busy staff moving briskly, the people who all seemed like they belonged in this world. Jack, in his old, faded clothes, felt out of place, as though he had wandered into a dream he didn't belong in. Musk's presence was the only thing that reassured him. He was the one person who had given Jack this chance, this crazy, unbelievable chance. "Jack, I want you to meet everyone," Musk said, guiding him into a conference room where a few people were already seated around a table, papers and tablets in front of them. Jack hesitated in the doorway, but Musk pushed open the door with a smile, his usual confident demeanor unwavering. "Everyone, this is Jack, the man who saved my life. I've got big plans for him, so let's get to work." The people around the table looked at Jack with varying degrees of curiosity, but Musk's words made it clear that Jack had been accepted into this world, however daunting that felt. One of the advisors, a woman in her late 30s named Sarah, smiled politely at Jack. "I've heard a lot about you," she said, extending a hand. "It's not every day someone with your background steps into our world, but I'm intrigued." Jack shook her hand, his grip firm but unsure. "I'm not sure what I'm doing here, to be honest, but Musk's been kind enough to give me a chance. I'm here to learn." Another man at the table, a middle-aged strategist named Greg, raised an eyebrow. "Learn what exactly?" The streets don't exactly prepare someone for business, Jack. We're here to change the world. We need more than good intentions. There was an awkward pause. Musk's tone shifted slightly. Greg, this is why I brought Jack in. He's been living with nothing. Surviving, fighting, surviving again. We have the luxury of technology and resources, but what we often forget is what it really means to survive. To fight for every inch of ground. Jack felt the weight of those words, but also the sting. He was aware of how they saw him, how Musk saw him. A man of the streets, someone who had lived through hell. And yet, there was something about Musk's words that made Jack feel seen. Not just as a man who had fought, but as someone who could do more. Sarah leaned in, sensing the tension. What exactly do you think we're going to do here, Jack? Change the world is one thing, but how do you fit into all this? Jack opened his mouth, but the words felt heavy, uncertain. How could he explain something that felt so impossible? That he didn't fully understand himself? I don't know, he muttered, rubbing the back of his neck. But I want to help. I don't know what that looks like yet. I'm still figuring it out. Musk's voice broke through the tension, firm and encouraging. That's what we're doing here. We're figuring it out. We're not perfect, and neither is the world. But we've got a shot at something bigger. Together, for the next few hours, the meeting continued with Musk and his team discussing new projects, new technologies, and ways to change the world. Jack tried to follow along, his head spinning with terms he'd never heard before, concepts that were way beyond anything he had experienced. But as the discussions unfolded, Jack began to feel something he hadn't expected, a sense of purpose. Sure, it wasn't his world, and sure, he wasn't exactly sure how he fit in yet, but it didn't matter. There was something about the people in the room, something about Musk's unwavering belief in change, that made Jack feel as though this was where he belonged. The meeting finally wrapped up, but as everyone filed out of the room, Musk pulled Jack aside. "You're doing great, Jack," Musk said, his tone quieter now, more personal. "You don't have to know everything right now. Just stay with it. Stay focused. You'll see. This is the beginning of something important." Jack nodded, feeling the weight of the day. For the first time, he understood the gravity of what Musk was asking of him. It wasn't just about helping with the big projects. It was about being part of something that could make a real impact on the world. Something that went beyond the superficial ideas of business and success. "I'll stick with it," Jack said, the words coming more easily now, his voice filled with quiet determination. "I won't let you down." Musk smiled, giving him a small nod. "I know you won't, Jack. Just remember, we're in this together." As the day ended, Jack stepped outside the sleek building into the city streets once more. But this time, the world felt different. The noise of the city still buzzed in the background, the hustle and bustle never slowing. But Jack felt a shift deep inside him. The future didn't feel like something that was out of his reach anymore. It felt like something he could touch, something he could shape. And as he walked down the street, he felt that familiar sense of survival rise up again. But this time, it wasn't just about surviving. It was about living. And for the first time in a long time, Jack felt like he had a reason to. The weeks that followed were a blur of meetings, plans, and adjustments. Jack wasn't exactly sure what he had expected, but it wasn't this. Life in Musk's world was fast, frenetic, and dizzying. The technology, the innovation, the way ideas bounced from person to person, it all felt like a whirlwind. For someone like Jack, who had spent years dodging the harsh realities of the street, the polished, high-tech world Musk inhabited felt like an alien landscape. But still, Jack was trying. He was showing up every day, working alongside Musk's team, doing his best to absorb the jargon, the concepts, the plans. And while he still felt like an outsider, Musk's encouragement kept him going. Elon, despite his busy schedule, made a point of checking in with Jack every few days, often asking how he was settling in, how he was feeling about the work. At first, Jack had been unsure. What was he even contributing? But Musk had a way of looking at him, of encouraging him to trust in himself. It wasn't about knowing everything from the start, Musk told him. It was about making a difference in the ways that mattered. The world didn't need more people just pushing papers and numbers. It needed people who understood life, who knew how to fight. Jack had started attending meetings that Musk held with his closest advisors, and while he wasn't exactly contributing yet, he was learning. It wasn't easy, but the more time he spent around these ambitious, highly driven individuals, the more he realized something. They were so focused on their own goals, their own vision, that they had become blind to the reality that a world existed outside their comfortable offices and private jets. A world that people like Jack had lived in for decades. One evening, after a particularly exhausting day, Jack walked out of the building, feeling the weight of it all pressing down on him. The streets felt oddly comforting after the chaos of the office. The noise, the people, the harsh lights. It was all still familiar, and it was grounding. For a moment, Jack forgot about the projects, the numbers, and the grand visions Musk had for changing the world. He was reminded of what had gotten him through all those years on the streets, his instincts, his resilience. As he stood on the corner, taking a deep breath of the cool night air, a voice called out from behind him. "Hey, you!" Jack turned to see Sarah, one of Musk's key advisors, walking towards him. Her expression was serious, but there was a hint of something else in her eyes. Curiosity, maybe, or concern. "Sarah," Jack greeted, forcing a smile. "What's up?" She came to stand next to him, her hands tucked into the pockets of her jacket. "You've been working with us for a while now, and I've noticed something," she said, her voice calm but direct. "You're not really engaging with the team. You're doing the work, but you're not there." Jack glanced away, uncomfortable. He hadn't expected this conversation. "I don't know what you mean. I've been doing what Musk asked." "I get that," Sarah replied, "but there's more to it than that. You've got potential, Jack. I'm not saying that you don't, but you're holding back. You're still thinking like someone who's trying to survive, not someone who's part of something that's changing the world." The words hit him harder than he expected. He had been trying so hard to fit into this new world, to push aside the past, but maybe Sarah was right. Maybe, deep down, he was still just surviving. It had been his default mode for so long. Fight, scrape by, survive. He had never truly stopped to think about what it meant to thrive. "I don't know if I can be what you all want me to be," Jack muttered, looking out at the street, his voice low. "I've lived my whole life one way. I don't know how to do anything different." Sarah watched him quietly for a moment, then spoke again, her voice soft but firm. "No one expects you to change overnight, Jack. But you can't keep living in the past. You've made it this far, and you've shown that you can survive. Now it's time to think bigger, to act bigger." Jack turned to face her. "You think I'm just going to forget about everything I've been through? All those years on the street, just gone? It doesn't work like that. You don't just forget who you are." "I'm not saying forget," Sarah replied. "I'm saying use it. Use what you've learned. You know how to survive in a world that chews people up and spits them out. You know how to read people, how to move in places most of us can't even imagine. That's not something you can just throw away. That's something that makes you invaluable. To Musk, to the team, to the world." The weight of her words lingered in the air, and Jack felt a flicker of something inside him. It wasn't hope exactly, but maybe possibility. He had spent so much time thinking he was stuck, trapped by the choices he had made, the circumstances he had been dealt. But maybe Sarah was right. Maybe it wasn't about forgetting where he had come from. Maybe it was about using everything he had learned to change the future. Just then, a figure walked by them. A man in a sharp suit, clearly out of place in the gritty streets they were standing in. Jack didn't recognize him, but Sarah's expression shifted. "Speaking of making a difference," Sarah murmured, her voice barely audible. "That's one of Musk's competitors. The ones who don't play by the rules." Jack glanced at her, his brow furrowing. "What do you mean?" Sarah's eyes stayed on the man, her focus sharp. "Musk is changing the game, but there are people out there who are trying to stop him. They'll do whatever it takes to keep the old system running. And they'll stop at nothing to make sure Musk doesn't succeed." Jack followed her gaze, his instincts kicking in. "And what do you want me to do about it?" "I want you to use what you know," she said. "You know how to survive in a world that's trying to destroy you. Now you need to use that skill to help us protect what Musk is building." Jack took a deep breath, his mind swirling. He had always fought to survive, but now it seemed like the fight was changing. There were bigger forces at play, and this time it wasn't just about scraping by. This was about something much more important. He nodded, a sense of determination starting to rise within him. "All right, I'll do it." Sarah smiled, her eyes glinting with approval. "Good. It's time to take your place, Jack." And as Jack walked back toward the building with Sarah, he realized something. His journey hadn't ended. It had just begun. The next few days were a blur of high-stakes decisions and whispered conversations behind closed doors. The world that Jack was becoming a part of was moving faster than he had ever imagined, and he was doing his best to keep up. But with every new meeting, every new strategy Musk's team unveiled, Jack couldn't shake the feeling that something bigger was at play. It wasn't just about tech or innovation. It was about power, control, and the unseen forces that operated behind the curtain. Forces that wanted to stop Musk's vision at any cost. Jack's instincts, honed over years of survival on the streets, were telling him that trouble was coming. He wasn't sure where it was coming from or how it would manifest, but he knew enough to recognize the signs. Too many powerful people with too much at stake, and too many threats being made in hushed tones. He had seen it before. Business deals gone wrong, powerful players looking to crush anyone who stood in their way. One afternoon, Musk pulled him aside. They were in Musk's private office, a sleek space filled with minimalist furniture, large glass windows overlooking the city, and a sense of calm that stood in stark contrast to the chaos Jack had grown accustomed to. Musk was pacing back and forth, his usual calm demeanor now replaced with an edge of urgency. "Jack," Musk said, his voice lower than usual, "we're hitting a wall with the new project. People aren't playing by the rules, and we've got some players who aren't happy with the direction we're going. I need you to help me figure out what's going on. I can't afford to waste time or resources." Jack nodded, his pulse quickening. He had a sense of what was coming next, but hearing Musk's words made the reality set in. "What exactly do you need from me?" he asked, his voice steady, though inside, he was bracing for the worst. "I need you to talk to some people for me," Musk replied, his gaze sharp. "People who have connections in places I don't. I need to know who's trying to undermine us and why. You've got an ability to see things others miss. Use that." Jack took a deep breath, trying to make sense of the task at hand. This was no longer just about helping Musk change the world. This was about protecting that world, about stepping into a fight he wasn't sure he was ready for. But he could feel the weight of responsibility pressing on him. If he didn't take action, everything Musk had worked for could be jeopardized. And Jack wasn't about to let that happen. Not after everything he'd been given. "I'll find out who's behind this," Jack said, his voice unwavering. "I won't let you down." Musk looked at him, a flicker of gratitude in his eyes. "I know you won't, but Jack, be careful. There are people who will do anything to keep things the way they are. People who will stop at nothing to destroy what we're building." Jack stood up, ready to leave. As he reached the door, he paused and looked back at Musk. "I've been on the streets my whole life. I know how to spot a threat. I'll handle it." Musk's eyes softened slightly, and he gave a small nod. "I believe you." As Jack walked out of Musk's office, a sense of foreboding washed over him. The stakes had just gotten higher, and the road ahead was going to be anything but easy. He knew what he had to do. He had to use every ounce of his street-honed instincts, every bit of the survival skills he had cultivated over the years, to navigate the dangerous game that Musk was playing. But this time, the stakes were bigger. The consequences of failure were monumental. The meeting was set for a quiet cafe on the outskirts of the city. The place was dimly lit, the smell of coffee heavy in the air. As Jack walked in, he saw the man sitting at a corner table, his eyes flicking up only for a moment before he gestured for Jack to sit. "You've been busy, huh?" the man said, his voice a low, gravelly murmur. "Word on the street is you've gone corporate. Musk's little pet project." Jack ignored the comment, taking a seat across from him. "I need information. People trying to sabotage Musk's work. They're playing dirty. Who's behind it?" The man chuckled, his eyes narrowing. "You're in deep now, aren't you? Musk's enemies don't take kindly to people poking around. You sure you want to know?" Jack leaned forward, his tone firm. I'm asking because I need to know. I'm not leaving until I have an answer. The man studied him for a moment before shrugging. All right. You want to know who's been pulling strings? It's the usual suspects. Rival corporations, the ones who see Musk's progress as a threat. But there's something bigger going on. Someone high up. Someone with more power than Musk's got. Jack's mind raced. Who? The man hesitated, glancing over his shoulder before leaning in. I don't know all the details, but there's talk of an insider. Someone close to Musk. Someone in his circle. And if that's true, well, you better be ready for what's coming. Jack felt the blood drain from his face. An insider? That changed everything. He had known there were enemies outside, but someone inside the camp, someone Musk trusted, could destroy everything in an instant. Thanks, Jack said, standing up abruptly. I'll keep this in mind. Jack knew the game had changed, and it was up to him to uncover the truth before it was too late. The discovery about an insider in Musk's circle had unsettled Jack more than he cared to admit. He had known the world he was stepping into was dangerous, but this was something else. There was a traitor in the midst, someone who had the access, the information, and the power to bring down everything Musk was working for. And Jack didn't know who it was. Worse still, he wasn't sure how long the insider had been working against them. Musk, on the other hand, seemed to sense the change in Jack's demeanor. He noticed how tense Jack had become, how he was pulling away from the rest of the team. Musk could be a perceptive man, and he didn't miss the subtle shifts in Jack's behavior. One afternoon, Musk invited Jack into his office, a rare moment of quiet between the whirlwind of the day's activities. The air was thick with unspoken questions as Musk shut the door behind him, looking at Jack with a steady, unflinching gaze. Something's off, Jack, Musk said, his voice low, his eyes scanning Jack for answers. I know you've been working hard, but I can tell you're not the same. What's going on? Jack shifted in his chair, suddenly feeling the weight of the question. He had been so focused on finding the traitor, on uncovering the truth, that he hadn't even realized how much the tension was eating at him. I've been thinking about what you said, Jack started, his voice quieter than usual, about stepping up, about being part of something bigger. But there's something I found, Elon. Something I think we need to talk about. Musk didn't interrupt, but his eyes narrowed slightly, a flicker of concern flashing across his face. What did you find? Jack took a deep breath, his heart racing. He had never felt more exposed, more vulnerable, than he did now. I spoke with someone. Contact. They told me something that doesn't sit right. They told me, there's someone inside the company working against us. Someone close to you. Musk's face hardened. The room seemed to close in on Jack as he continued, unable to hold back anymore. I don't know who it is yet, but I think we've got a mole. Someone who has the power to destroy everything we're working for. And the worst part is, Elon, I think it's someone you trust. There was a long pause, and Jack could hear his own breath as he waited for Musk's response. For a moment, it felt as if the entire world had stopped spinning. Then, slowly, Musk sat back in his chair, his fingers steepled in front of him. Are you sure about this? Musk asked, his voice measured, betraying none of the emotion Jack had expected. I've had this conversation with myself a dozen times, and I've been trying to ignore it, hoping it's just paranoia. But if there's someone betraying us, I need to know. Jack's stomach churned. This was it. He had stepped out of the shadows, revealing what he had suspected all along. But now, it felt like he was standing on the edge of a cliff, waiting for Musk to make the next move. I'm sure, Jack said, his voice steady, though the weight of the situation was starting to settle on his shoulders. But I don't know who it is yet. I need time to find out. I can do this, Elon. I can figure it out. Musk stood up abruptly, walking toward the window and staring out at the city below. I'll give you time. But you have to know, Jack, this isn't just about us anymore. If this mole is really working against us, it's bigger than I thought. This could bring everything crashing down. And if I'm wrong, if I've trusted someone who's been playing me all along, then I'm as much a part of the problem as anyone. Jack nodded, the weight of those words pressing heavily on him. He wasn't just fighting for Musk's vision anymore. He was fighting for everything Musk had built. And if they failed, it wouldn't just be Musk who lost. It would be all of them. As Jack turned to leave the office, a sense of dread settled in the pit of his stomach. The uncertainty was crushing, and the realization hit him like a cold slap. He couldn't trust anyone. But just as he reached the door, a voice stopped him in his tracks. "You're looking for the mole, Jack," Musk said quietly. "But what if the real enemy is much closer than you think?" Jack turned back around slowly, confusion clouding his face. "What do you mean?" Musk stepped toward him, his expression unreadable. "I've been thinking about everything you said. The mole, the sabotage. But what if the person betraying us isn't someone from the outside? What if it's someone who's already sitting at this table?" Jack blinked, the words hanging in the air like a bomb waiting to detonate. "What do you mean? You think?" Musk's face tightened, his eyes shadowed with something deeper. "I think the real threat isn't someone trying to destroy our business from the outside. I think the real threat is someone in this room. Someone who's been pulling the strings all along." Jack froze. He had no idea what Musk was suggesting, but the gravity of the words began to sink in. Who could it be? Musk's next words hit Jack like a ton of bricks. "Jack, the person you're looking for." "It's me." Jack's eyes widened, disbelief flooding his system. "What, Elon, that..." "I know it sounds crazy," Musk continued, cutting him off. "But the longer I've been in this game, the more I've realized that people like me, people with power, are the ones who can easily become part of the problem. Maybe I've been the one holding things back all along without even realizing it." Jack was stunned, his mind spinning. "No, it can't be. You're the one trying to change everything. You're the one trying to help." "I know," Musk said, his voice quieter now, filled with regret. "But sometimes, Jack, the people who want to change the world the most are the ones who end up being the most dangerous."